In the final days of World War II, Berlin became the epicenter of a cataclysmic clash that would seal the fate of an empire. As the Soviet forces stormed from the east and Allied troops encircled from the west, the city braced for an unprecedented confrontation. Inside the crumbling Führerbunker, Adolf Hitler clung desperately to a crumbling dream, while outside, Berlin's streets transformed into a brutal battlefield where every inch was contested with ferocious intensity. Amidst the chaos and destruction, a city once proud and formidable now faced its ultimate reckoning. This is the harrowing, decisive clash of the Battle of Berlin, where the final chapter of the Third Reich was written in fire and blood. Chapter number 1, Setting the Stage. In this chapter, we will delve into the critical context and events leading up to the Battle of Berlin, offering a comprehensive backdrop to one of World War II's most decisive confrontations. The chapter begins by situating the Battle of Berlin within the broader conflict of World War II, focusing on the tense and climactic period of early 1945. As the year unfolded, the war was nearing its end, with the Eastern and Western fronts defining the final phases of combat. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union had amassed a formidable force, pushing relentlessly westward as part of its strategic objective to dismantle the Nazi regime. Simultaneously, on the Western Front, Allied forces, including the American, British, and Canadian armies, advanced into Germany, having successfully broken through the Siegfried Line and crossed the Rhine River. The city of Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich, stood as the final bastion of Nazi resistance, imbued with both symbolic and strategic importance. The Soviet Union's determination to capture Berlin was not only a matter of military strategy, but also of national pride and geopolitical dominance. The narrative then shifts to the state of Nazi Germany, illustrating the dire circumstances faced by the crumbling regime. By early 1945, the collapse of Nazi defenses was evident on multiple fronts. Hitler, ensconced in his fortified bunker beneath the Reich's chancellery, was increasingly detached from reality, exhibiting both desperation and overconfidence. His last public appearance on his birthday, April 20th, 1945, was marked by an air of grim defiance, reflecting his refusal to acknowledge the inevitability of defeat. The juxtaposition of Hitler's bravado with the stark reality of the German military's disintegration highlights the dissonance within the Nazi leadership. The chapter also examines the decisions made by the Allied powers, particularly the Americans, whose forces had halted their advance at the Elbe River, allowing the Soviets to take the lead in the push towards Berlin. General Dwight D. Eisenhower's strategic decision to pause and consult with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin was pivotal. Eisenhower's communication with Stalin was not merely a matter of military coordination, but also a reflection of the complex interplay of diplomacy and strategy. Stalin's responses and promises to his commanders were pivotal in shaping the final stages of the battle. As we conclude this segment, we set the stage for the detailed examination of the military preparations and the initial confrontations that defined the early stages of the Battle of Berlin. The next chapter will delve into the Soviet offensive and the German defenses, exploring the specific strategies employed and the fierce engagements that set the stage for the battle's intensity. Chapter number 2, Prelude to the Battle. In this chapter, we will delve into the intricate prelude to the Battle of Berlin, exploring the vast Soviet preparations, German defensive strategies, and the initial clashes that set the stage for the ultimate confrontation. As early April 1945 unfolded, the Soviets amassed a staggering 2.5 million troops, supported by a formidable arsenal of tanks, artillery, and aircraft, and positioned them along the Oder-Neisse line. This meticulous buildup reflected the Soviet strategic intent to launch a comprehensive assault on Berlin, orchestrated by top commanders like Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev, who meticulously planned the multi-pronged attack designed to encircle and crush the German defenses. On the German side, Berlin's defenses were hastily constructed, consisting of Volkssturm militias, Waffen-SS units, and the remnants of the Wehrmacht, all entrenched in key strategic points such as the Reich's chancellery, Führerbunker, and Reichstag, transforming them into fortified strongholds in a desperate bid to protect the heart of the Nazi regime. The initial clashes were marked by intense combat, starting with the Soviet crossing of the Oder River, a significant engineering feat that marked the beginning of their push into German territory. The Soviets faced fierce resistance at the Seelow Heights, a crucial defensive position held by the Germans, which saw some of the most brutal fighting of the campaign. Despite their defensive preparations, the German forces struggled to repel the Soviet advance, and the relentless Soviet assault, characterized by overwhelming firepower and tactical coordination, eventually broke through the German lines. The clash at Seelow Heights underscored the desperation of the German defenders and the effectiveness of Soviet tactics, with German counterattacks failing to stem the tide of Soviet aggression, setting the stage for the intense urban combat that would follow. Next, we will examine the brutal street-by-street battles within Berlin, the final desperate resistance of the German defenders, and the eventual fall of the city as Soviet forces closed in on their ultimate objective. Chapter number 3, the battle begins. In this chapter, we delve into the fierce and decisive early phases of the Battle of Berlin, beginning with the initial Soviet assaults from April 16th to April 19th, 1945. The battle commenced with the Soviets launching a massive offensive against the Seelow Heights, a critical German defensive stronghold located along the Oder River. The Soviets, under the command of General Georgy Zhukov, orchestrated a methodical and brutal assault involving a combination of overwhelming artillery fire, including the notorious Katyusha rocket launchers and relentless infantry advances. The Soviet artillery barrage was unprecedented in scale, designed to obliterate German fortifications and demoralize the defenders. Despite the massive firepower and the extensive preparation, the Soviet advance was met with stiff German resistance, leading to catastrophic casualties on both sides. The German forces, commanded by General Gotthard Heinrici, had fortified Seelow Heights with an intricate network of bunkers, minefields, and obstacles, creating a formidable defensive line. The defenders, including battle-hardened Wehrmacht troops and the Volkssturm, a militia composed of older men and boys, fought tenaciously to hold their ground, inflicting heavy losses on the Soviet attackers. The battle at Seelow Heights was characterized by intense, close-quarters combat, with both sides suffering significant casualties. The Soviets employed a tactic of attrition, using their numerical superiority and firepower to gradually wear down the German defenses. By April 19th, Zhukov's forces managed to achieve a breakthrough at Seelow Heights, despite the high cost in lives and equipment. This success allowed them to advance further westward, setting the stage for the final assault on Berlin. Concurrently, Marshal Ivan Konev's First Ukrainian Front advanced swiftly through the Neisse River, exploiting the gap created by Zhukov's breakthrough and applying pressure from the southern approach. Konev's rapid advance was crucial in encircling Berlin and trapping the German forces within the city. In response to the Soviet onslaught, the Germans made frantic efforts to reinforce their defenses around Berlin. Adolf Hitler, ensconced in his bunker, issued desperate orders for every available resource to be committed to the defense of the city. This included the mobilization of civilian militias, which were largely inexperienced and poorly equipped, but were pressed into service to fortify positions and man defensive lines. Additionally, foreign volunteers, including remnants of Waffen-SS units and other Allied forces, were hastily assembled to bolster the German defenses. These foreign units, although motivated, were often inadequately supplied and poorly integrated into the German defense structure. As the Soviets pushed closer, the German defenders faced overwhelming odds, with the city's defenses gradually crumbling under the relentless Soviet pressure. The intense urban combat that followed would see the city reduced to rubble as the final confrontation unfolded. In the next chapter, we will examine the brutal urban warfare within Berlin, the last-ditch German efforts to repel the Soviet forces, and the final moments leading to the city's surrender. Chapter number 4, Encirclement and Initial Breach. In this chapter, we will explore the dramatic and pivotal period of encirclement and initial breaches during the Battle of Berlin, spanning from April 20th to April 24th, 1945. As the Soviets closed in on Berlin from the north, south, and east, the encirclement operation was a meticulously coordinated effort led by Generals Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev. Zhukov's forces, advancing from the east, and Konev's troops, pushing from the south, created a noose around the city that tightened with each passing day. The Soviet encirclement effectively cut off Berlin from the rest of the German defenses, trapping the remaining German forces and civilian population within the city. This phase saw the Soviets making initial breaches into Berlin's outer defenses, including the heavily fortified suburban areas and the outer ring of the city's fortifications. The Soviet offensive rapidly eroded the German positions, and the Wehrmacht, bolstered by remnants of the Volkssturm and various other defensive elements, struggled to mount an effective defense against the overwhelming Soviet firepower and numerical superiority. The ensuing urban warfare became a brutal and chaotic struggle of street-to-street fighting. The Germans, employing a range of anti-tank weapons and defensive tactics tailored for urban combat, engaged in fierce resistance. The city's narrow streets, crumbling buildings, and dense civilian population posed significant challenges for the Soviet forces, complicating their advances and leading to heavy casualties on both sides. The close-quarter battles in Berlin were marked by the use of improvised fortifications, and the deployment of anti-tank weapons by the Germans to slow the Soviet progress. The Soviets faced considerable difficulties adapting their tactics to the urban environment, where traditional methods of warfare were less effective. Alongside the military conflict, the plight of Berlin's civilians was dire. The city's residents, trapped in the crossfire, faced a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale. Both sides committed atrocities, with widespread reports of violence and suffering inflicted upon the civilian population. The intense fighting and bombardments led to severe destruction of infrastructure, causing shortages of food, medical supplies, and basic necessities. The civilian toll was immense, with numerous accounts of casualties and suffering as the battle raged on. As the chapter concludes, we will transition to examining the final stages of the battle, focusing on the climax of the Soviet assault, the ultimate collapse of German defenses, and the surrender of Berlin. Chapter number 5, the Inner City Battle. In this chapter, we delve into the fierce and decisive battles that defined the assault on central Berlin from April 25th to April 30th, 1945, exploring the last days of the Third Reich amidst the crumbling remnants of its capital. As the Soviet forces, led by Generals Zhukov and Konev, pressed their attack, their strategic objectives focused on capturing the Führerbunker, the Reich Chancellery, and the Reichstag, which were not only key military positions, but also potent symbols of Nazi power. The fighting in central Berlin was characterized by intense street battles, as Soviet troops encountered heroic and desperate resistance from German defenders, including Wehrmacht soldiers, Waffen-SS units, and increasingly civilian volunteers. The Reich Chancellery and surrounding areas became scenes of brutal skirmishes, with both sides engaging in vicious hand-to-hand combat amidst the ruins of the city. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Führerbunker, Adolf Hitler's final days were marked by a palpable sense of doom and despair. The Führer, isolated from the world above, issued a series of increasingly erratic orders, reflecting his deteriorating mental state as the Soviet encroachment grew ever closer. The bunker's atmosphere was tense and bleak, with Hitler's final moments coming on April 30th, 1945, when he and Eva Braun committed suicide, marking the end of the Führer's reign. As the Soviets advanced toward the heart of Berlin, the battle for the Reichstag took on symbolic significance, representing the final act of the Nazi regime's collapse. The fighting around this iconic building was fierce, with Soviet soldiers facing determined German resistance in their efforts to capture the Reichstag. The battle culminated in Soviet victory and the symbolic raising of the Soviet flag over the Reichstag on April 30th, a powerful image signifying the end of Nazi rule in Berlin. As we conclude this chapter, we will transition into the aftermath of the battle, examining the final days of Berlin under Soviet occupation, the surrender of German forces, and the broader implications of the battle's outcome on the concluding phase of World War II. Chapter number 6, the aftermath. In this chapter, we will explore the critical aftermath of the Battle of Berlin, focusing on the period from May 1st to May 8th, 1945, a time of profound transformation and reckoning. Following the intense and brutal battle for the German capital, the city finally fell to the Soviet forces, marking the official surrender of Nazi Germany. As the last of the German resistance crumbled, the city was rapidly occupied by Soviet troops, who began the complex process of dividing Berlin into sectors, with the Soviets taking control of the eastern half, while the western portions were eventually occupied by the Allies. The initial phase of post-war administration saw the implementation of immediate retribution measures against remaining Nazi officials and collaborators, setting the stage for the broader denazification efforts that would follow. The human cost of the battle was staggering. The streets of Berlin were littered with debris, the cityscape was heavily scarred by combat, and the casualties included not only military personnel but a significant number of civilians who had been caught in the crossfire. The destruction was immense, with large sections of the city reduced to ruins, profoundly impacting both the surviving German population and the soldiers who witnessed the devastation. As Berlin began to emerge from the ashes of war, the legacy of the battle became a significant chapter in the broader narrative of World War II, symbolizing the end of the Nazi regime and the beginning of a new era in Europe. The Nuremberg trials, which commenced shortly after the battle, were pivotal in bringing Nazi war criminals to justice, with high-ranking officials facing prosecution for their roles in war crimes and crimes against humanity. The process of denazification sought to purge German society of Nazi influence, addressing the deep-rooted ideologies and reconstructing the political and social fabric of Germany. This monumental task involved rebuilding Berlin, grappling with the legacies of war, and laying the groundwork for a new democratic society. As we conclude this chapter, we will next delve into the broader implications of the Battle of Berlin on the geopolitical landscape of post-war Europe, examining how the city's fall reshaped international relations and set the stage for the Cold War. Chapter number 7, detailed personal accounts and anecdotes. In this chapter, we will delve into the personal accounts and poignant anecdotes from the Battle of Berlin, examining the human experiences that defined this pivotal confrontation. We begin with the stories of soldiers from both the Soviet and German forces, each offering a unique perspective on the harrowing and often heroic experiences they endured during the conflict. Soviet soldiers, braving the intense urban warfare, recount their relentless advance through Berlin's ruined streets, their tales marked by both grim determination and moments of unexpected camaraderie amidst the chaos. German soldiers, on the other hand, reflect on the desperate last stands they made, the increasingly futile efforts to defend their crumbling positions, and the profound sense of disillusionment as the Third Reich neared its end. Their accounts are filled with vivid descriptions of brutal encounters, the constant fear of encirclement, and the emotional toll of fighting on home soil, facing overwhelming odds. Alongside these military narratives, we will also explore the harrowing experiences of Berlin's civilians who found themselves ensnared in the crossfire of this devastating battle. Eyewitness testimonies from residents provide a harrowing view of their struggle for survival amid the relentless bombardment and street fighting, highlighting their resilience and resourcefulness in the face of unprecedented destruction and peril. The chapter will also feature insights from the leadership on both sides, offering a deeper understanding of the strategic decisions and reflections that shaped the course of the battle. Soviet and German commanders, including figures such as Georgy Zhukov and Wilhelm Keitel, provide their perspectives on the execution of their strategies, the challenges they faced, and the impact of their decisions on the unfolding events. Their reflections offer valuable context to the personal stories, shedding light on the broader tactical and operational considerations that influence the battle's outcome. As we conclude this chapter, we will transition to an examination of the broader aftermath of the battle, exploring how the personal and strategic elements of this final confrontation influenced the immediate post-war environment and the shaping of Europe's future. Chapter number 8, Analysis and Reflections. In this chapter, we will dissect the strategic, political, and historical ramifications of the Battle of Berlin, a confrontation that marked the denouement of World War II in Europe and laid the groundwork for the post-war world order. We begin by analyzing the intricate military strategies that defined the battle, focusing on the Soviet Union's comprehensive approach under Generals Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev. The Soviets employed a meticulously coordinated strategy that involved massing troops and resources on the Oder-Neisse line, overwhelming German defenses with a barrage of artillery, tanks, and Katyusha rockets, and executing a multi-pronged assault to encircle Berlin from the north, south, and east. Zhukov's assault on Seelow Heights, a fiercely contested battle resulting in high casualties on both sides, was instrumental in breaking through the German defensive line and setting the stage for the final push into the city. Konev's rapid advance through the Neisse River complemented this strategy, leading to the eventual encirclement of Berlin and the erosion of German resistance. On the German side, the defensive measures taken by the Wehrmacht, Volkssturm, and Waffen-SS, including the fortification of key strategic points such as the Führerbunker, Reichschancellery, and Reichstag, were notable but ultimately insufficient against the Soviet onslaught. The German forces, despite their efforts to bolster defenses and deploy civilian militias, faced insurmountable odds, and their strategies could not stem the tide of the Soviet advance. We then turn to the political implications of Berlin's fall, highlighting how the city's capture not only marked the end of Nazi Germany, but also triggered the division of Berlin and Germany into occupation zones, setting the stage for the Cold War. The immediate post-war administration saw the city split between the Soviet Union and the Allied powers, with the subsequent creation of East and West Berlin becoming a symbol of the broader ideological struggle between communism and capitalism. The historical significance of the battle is underscored by its role in ending the European conflict and shaping the geopolitical landscape of the 20th century. We will explore how the battle's outcomes influenced military strategies, international relations, and the reconstruction of Europe, offering a detailed reflection on the battle's legacy and its enduring impact on global history. Next, we will delve into the specific consequences of these developments, examining their effects on the immediate post-war environment and the long-term political landscape. Chapter number 9, Comprehensive Visual and Tactical Breakdown. In this chapter, we will embark on a comprehensive visual and tactical breakdown of the Battle of Berlin, meticulously examining how maps, diagrams, reenactments, and archival materials illuminate the complexity of this pivotal conflict. We begin by exploring detailed maps that chart the troop movements and battle lines throughout the assault on Berlin, providing a clear view of the Soviet encirclement from the north, south, and east, and the German defensive positions that were systematically overrun. These maps illustrate the strategic approach of the Soviet forces under Generals Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev, showcasing the progression from the initial crossings of the Oder River to the final push into central Berlin. Complementing these maps are diagrams of key locations and defensive structures within Berlin, including the heavily fortified Reichschancellery, Führerbunker, and Reichstag, which were focal points of the intense urban combat. These diagrams reveal the layout of the German defenses and the Soviet tactics used to breach them, including the use of artillery, tanks, and the relentless advance of infantry through the devastated city streets. Reenactments and CGI visualizations bring these historical moments to life, depicting the fierce battles and strategic maneuvers that defined the fight for Berlin. Through carefully staged reenactments, we witness the dramatic encounters between Soviet and German forces, highlighting the bravery and desperation of soldiers on both sides. CGI visualizations offer a dynamic representation of the urban combat environment, illustrating how Soviet forces navigated the rubble-strewn streets and faced formidable German resistance. Archival footage and photographs provide a stark, authentic glimpse into the battle's aftermath, capturing the widespread destruction and the human toll of the conflict. These visuals not only document the devastation of Berlin, but also convey the harrowing experiences of soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire. As we proceed, we will analyze how these visual and tactical elements contribute to our understanding of the battle's scope and impact, setting the stage for a deeper exploration of the broader strategic implications and the enduring legacy of this historic confrontation. Chapter number 10, Epilogue. In this final chapter, we reflect on the end of World War II in Europe, focusing on the significance of the Battle of Berlin and the subsequent transition from war to peace. We begin by examining how the Battle of Berlin marked the climax of the European theater, symbolizing the definitive collapse of Nazi Germany and the profound shift in global power dynamics. The fall of Berlin on May 2, 1945, was not only a decisive military victory for the Allied forces, but also a pivotal moment that ushered in the end of the war in Europe, setting the stage for a new world order. This segment delves into the process of rebuilding Europe, exploring the monumental task of reconstructing cities, societies, and economies devastated by years of conflict. As Europe began to recover, the focus shifted to honoring the fallen, with tributes paid to the soldiers and civilians who lost their lives during the battle and the war at large. The memorials and remembrance ceremonies became integral to this process, serving as a testament to the sacrifices made and ensuring that the memory of those who perished was preserved for future generations. In closing, we summarize the key lessons and messages derived from the Battle of Berlin, emphasizing the importance of remembering this pivotal chapter in history to prevent the recurrence of such devastating conflicts. This final reflection underscores the enduring relevance of historical awareness in fostering peace and understanding, reminding us of the high cost of war and the ongoing need for vigilance and reconciliation in the pursuit of a more peaceful world. As we conclude this comprehensive exploration of the Battle of Berlin, we prepare to move forward into an analysis of how the lessons learned from this epic confrontation continue to shape our global landscape and inform contemporary perspectives on conflict and diplomacy. As the dust settled on the streets of Berlin and the last echoes of gunfire faded into history, the monumental clash that shaped the final days of the Third Reich left an indelible mark on the world. The Battle of Berlin was not just a brutal military confrontation, but a dramatic culmination of decades of conflict, symbolizing the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in global history. As we reflect on this harrowing yet pivotal moment, we uncover the profound transformations that followed, from the city's ruins to the reshaping of post-war Europe. For more in-depth explorations of historical events and their enduring impacts, subscribe to our channel. Join us as we continue to unravel the stories that have shaped our world, and don't miss out on future content that dives deep into the past and its lessons for the present.